And then we're gonna hit live over here, and then I actually have to be live. So here we go. All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Connor Flanagan from the Southampton History Museum, and we're joined here this morning with my coworker and our research center manager, Mary Cummings, and she'll be giving her talk today on one of the women highlighted in our current exhibit, High Style in the Gilded Age. What we're going to do now is essentially just wait for everybody to join into the talk, and we will get started in the next few minutes or so. It looks like we actually already have almost everybody in here with us right from the jump, which is great. But a little bit of housekeeping before we fully get started. If anybody has a question throughout this talk, if you go to the bottom of the Zoom page, you'll see there's a button that says Q&A. You'll be able to click that, submit any questions you want that way, and at the end of the talk, I'll come back in and join Mary and read off any questions anyone might have. Also, anybody that's watching us live on Facebook, same thing, feel free to submit any questions you might have into the comment section, and we'll be glad to answer any questions you have at the end. If you're interested in anything else that the Southampton History Museum is up to, I suggest going to our website, southamptonhistorymuseum.org/calendar, and you'll be able to see all of our upcoming events. Our next program is actually this Friday. We're going to be having a Q&A about the film Conscience Point. It's a really great, powerful film about the local Shinnecock Native Americans and their sort of relationship with the world today. The video we are hosting a virtual screening of, so if you RSVP for that Q&A, you'll be sent a link to be able to watch the documentary. And then if you're free at 5 o'clock on Friday night, you can join us for the Q&A with the director of the film. If you go to our website, again, southamptonhistorymuseum.org or southamptonhistory.org/calendar, you'll see we have a bunch more programs going on all next week. I think we have 5 different programs, or 6 different programs all going on all next week. And the last thing I want to talk about before we get started with the lecture is I want to make sure that everybody that's watching us today that lives within the Southampton Union Free School District, make sure that they vote yes on on proposition number 5. That is our request for assistance via money through the school tax fund to support the museum. All information about that vote can be found on southamptonhistory.org/BOE. On there, you'll be able to read what we're asking for, what we're doing with that money. And in fact, you're watching what we're doing with that money. All the programs that we do, all of our lectures are always 100% free, and it's funded via this ask that we do every year. So again, we hope everybody can vote yes on the proposition number 5. Any questions you might have, you can email me directly or go to our website, southamptonhistory.org/BOE, and you can read all about the vote and everything about it. But now I'll stop my rambling, and we can turn things over to Mary Cummings, as I said before, who is my coworker and the research center manager at the Southampton History Museum. Beyond that, she's also a writer and historian. She has written for numerous publications, including the New York Times, and was the arts editor and principal feature writer at the Southampton Press for 7 years. She has published illustrated histories, she has published illustrated histories of Southampton and the 1938 hurricane. She is also the author of A Social History of Southampton Hospital, and in 2018, Pegasus Books published Saving Sin City, her nonfiction book on the murder of Stanford White and the trial that followed. She currently lives in Southampton, in fact, just behind where the museum property is located. But today, she'll be talking about, like I said, one of the women highlighted in our Gilded Age exhibit, which I'll now turn over to Mary so she can start. Enjoy, everybody.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me for this live online talk co-sponsored by the Southampton History Museum and the Rogers Memorial Library. Lily Barney is the subject of this second talk in a series inspired by the current exhibit at the Southampton History Museum, High Style in the Gilded Age, Southampton, 1870 to 1930. As the manager of the research center at the museum, I was responsible for selecting 12 of Southampton's fashionable trendsetters during those years. Now, while the museum remains closed, I have been deepening my research into the women's lives, preparing the 12 talks in the series, each of which focuses on one of them. Though they all lived lives of great privilege, what I found is that they were not necessarily happy, and that most were very hard workers, managing complex households, keeping up appearances, and rarely enjoying the personal freedoms granted their husbands in the seriously patriarchal society of the Gilded Age. My first talk was on Jeanette Ralston Chase Hoyt, who enlivened the early resort with her unconventional flair. Lily Barney is a very different type. She put family and social standing above all else and dedicated all of her efforts to the navigating the social seas. With a high-strung husband, 2 daughters to guide through society's rituals towards a suitable marriage, and a full calendar of A-list events, she's a social star, but stalked by tragedy. Like her famous husband, brother, William Collins Whitney, who would become one of the richest and most powerful men in New York City, Lily is born in Massachusetts and probably spends most of her childhood years in the quaint New England town of Conway. Though the family does not have the vast fortune that her brother will eventually acquire, the Whitneys are well off, and Lily can boast a very proud lineage, her mother's forebears having arrived on the Mayflower. General James S. Whitney, Lily's father, is for a half-century a Democratic leader in Massachusetts and serves as collector of the Port of Boston, a prime political plum under President Buchanan. Little is known of Lily's early childhood, but she no doubt receives instruction in the arts and skills that prepare a young upper-class female of the Gilded Age to make a suitable marriage. In this respect, Lily does not disappoint. She has much going for her, not least her handsome, devoted brother, and she stands out among her contemporaries on the marriage market. She soon attracts the interest of Charles T. Barney, the son of a successful Cleveland businessman who moved his family to New York City in 1857 to pursue his career at Wells Fargo and Company, and he's named president of the company in 1869. His son Charles, with his good looks, obvious drive, and precocious gift for finance, is expected to go far in the banking world. And Lily is won over, and she and Charles are married shortly after his graduation from Williams College in 1870. In New York, Lily Barney is a serious contender among the city's young matrons vying for social supremacy in the closed circle of the wealthy elite. That's where every social success or misstep is consequential, diligently reported in the society pages of the dozen or so daily newspapers. Lily and Charles, a financial genius, but a reckless one, scale social heights with the blessing of Lily's brother, William Collins Whitney. Whitney will accumulate his fabulous fortune after abandoning his youthful idealism and a promising political career to forge ties with the corrupt Tammany political machine. In league with the notorious Boss Croker, Whitney is able to satisfy his ravenous appetite for luxury magnificence, and stables filled with winning racehorses. Among his most profitable gambit is his monopoly over the city's surface transit system, which he achieves thanks to franchises awarded by his pal, Boss Croker. But rather than make promised improvements to the system, Whitney pockets the profits and allows the system to deteriorate abysmally. This angers the masses who must ride the system, but does not seem to trouble his upper-class peers who continue to envy and admire him. Lily and Charles are A-list guests, while their own parties set a new standard for extravagance. They share a box at the opera with the Stanford Whites, and Barney and the celebrated architect become lifelong friends. Barney will commission 2 townhouses in New York from White. The first, an early effort by White, gets mixed reviews. It being the fashion at the time to give each room a different theme, medieval, Renaissance, etc., White embraces the idea with such exuberance that one critic berates the house as a, quote, mad orgy of bad architecture. Charles and Lily are apparently happy with the house, though, but when they feel it no longer sufficiently reflects their rising stature in society, they sell it to New York World publisher Joseph Pulitzer and ask White to provide the redesign of a more impressive residence for the family on Park Avenue. For Lily, there are always at least 2 fully staffed residences to manage, 2 daughters to be introduced to society and groomed for the marriage market, and a husband who will rise to become president of the Knickerbocker Trust Company, but whose speculative market gambles and so-called bouts of melancholy, we would call it depression, put added stress on his wife. In 1886, Charles and Lily burnished their social image by joining the Southampton summer colony, paying $20,000 for Windy Barn, the Hoyt house on Lake Agawam. Shortly after they take possession of the house, there are reports of renovations nearly doubling its size. A ballroom is added for lavish summer entertaining, along with other improvements that prompt the local press to hail it as, quote, one of the finest country houses in Southampton. At this point, Southampton's status as a fashionable resort is no longer in doubt. Trains arriving from the city are delivering more than 700 summer visitors, though the handsome railway station didn't open until 1902. The Meadow Club is ready to make the transition from an informal group of picnickers to the elite society venue it will become. The club had its origins when a few ladies from among the first families to make Southampton their summer retreat formed an informal club and met for tea in the meadow near their houses. The get-togethers were usually held on Saturday mornings following their arrival by train on Friday evening. This first wave of summer colonists prided themselves in savoring the rustic pleasures of picnicking and other outdoor activities. This was not Newport, they sniffed, with its emphasis on opulence. This was rusticating as it was meant to be. But rustication as an ideal very soon gave way to the less modest approach to summertime social life. And in the decades since Windy Barn paved the way as the first summer cottage to be built on the western shore of Lake Agawam, others have followed. Perhaps the most impressive among those that filled the shoreline was the house owned by Barney's neighbor to the north, the wealthy banker, cotton merchant, and New York State Senator J. Hampton Robb. In 1885, Robb had hired New York's premier architectural firm, McKim, Mead and White, to design the handsome summer residence Robb called the Dolphins. To manage and maintain their position in the center of this, as the center of the city's social whirl, the Barneys must continue to entertain extravagantly and often. Elaborate costumed fairs are all the rage, and here father and daughter are in 16th century costume for one of the Barneys' storied parties at their splendid Park Avenue residence. The year 1901 sees what may prove to be Lily's greatest social triumph, though it will be followed by severe setbacks. On January 4th, William Whitney combines the unveiling of his splendid new Italian Renaissance palace on Fifth Avenue, one of his friend Stanford White's most lavish creations, with a party celebrating Lily's daughter's, Helen's, debut in society. It's a frigid night, but there's a crowd of sidewalk gawkers gathered in front of the mansion to witness the pageant of preening socialites as they descend from their carriages and enter the green onyx vestibule, once part of an ancient Florentine mansion. Through the windows, the crowd sees only a tiny sliver of the ballroom, which is praised in the press as, quote, the largest and most exquisite private ballroom in America, with fittings and furnishings taken largely from foreign cities, close quote. After a whirlwind European shopping trip, Stanford White had returned with whole ceilings, fireplaces, and antique furnishings, sometimes entire rooms removed intact from ancient European estates and purchased for Windy from high-end dealers. Stationed at the entrance to the ballroom to greet guests, Lily, flanked by her brother and daughter, is resplendent in velvet and brocade. Helen is demurely radiant in a gown of white mousseline de soie. Some 400 guests dance through the night at the party, which is the high point of the social season. It will be hailed by social historians as the event that, quote, ushered in the 20th century version of the age of extravagance. Inspired, perhaps, by such magnificence, Barney hires his friend Stanford White to completely renovate the Park Avenue residence. The family is exiled to a hotel where Lily watches her husband's mental state deteriorate as the work drags on. She complains to White that Charlie is horribly depressed by the delay and pleads with him to finish the work. Then, in November 1901, with the work on Park Avenue still unfinished, disaster strikes in Southampton when a spectacular fire completely destroys the Lake Agawam house and everything in it. The family, still in residence, is forced to flee for their lives. A reporter describes a frantic Charles Barney railing against the slow pace of the fireman's efforts as he watches his mansion burn to the ground. The fiery demise of Windy Barn is dramatically reported in the New York Times, which headlines the story, Barney's house burned, country residence at Southampton, Long Island destroyed, family fled for life, loss $250,000. Beneath the headline, the reporter laments that the house, with all its contents, including rare bric-a-brac and paintings of great value by European artists, was totally destroyed last night. It was still occupied, as it's the custom of the family to remain here until late November. Forced to flee their lives in scant attire, the account continues, they left behind much fine jewelry in the ruins of the house, of which this morning nothing remains but 3 tall chimneys. Lily's missing jewels will be of continuing concern even after the last ember of the spectacular conflagration has been extinguished. The Brooklyn Eagle estimates their worth at nearly $100,000 and reports that an expert from Tiffany's will visit the site to see if any can be rescued from the ashes. Then there's some good news from the New York Times on November 21st. 30 precious stones have been recovered and only 7 more diamonds are to be accounted for. Local builder William Enoch has been busy looking for the diamonds, carefully removing and sifting the ashes, then examining the bottom of the sieve with a magnifying glass. Soured by the experience, the Barneys do not rebuild, and thereafter they come to Southampton only as visitors. When both daughters marry well, with appropriate praise from the press, Lily might be forgiven for thinking that the tough times are behind her. Then, in 1907, Charles Barney makes a reckless attempt to corner the copper market, joining with some very, very shady associates, including the notorious Wall Street scoundrel, Charlie Morse. An unscrupulous but very successful scammer, Morse had earned the contempt of New Yorkers when he plotted with the corrupt Mayor Van Wyck and boss Croker to monopolize the natural ice market in the city, and then raise the price to unaffordable levels. Without ice, milk spoiled, children suffered, and sometimes infants died. Despite outrage and multiple lawsuits, Morse has managed to emerge from the ice scandal without ruinous financial consequences. And much to his later regret, Charles Barney permits his bank to hold $1 million worth of stock in Morse's shady companies. Morse, now free to turn his thoughts to cornering the even more promising copper market, enlists Barney in his scheme, which will have catastrophic consequences, participating a financial panic of colossal proportions. For a banker with an almost paranoid fear of losing status, it's baffling that Barney would associate himself with a notorious Wall Street swindler. But Morse has recognized another side of his man. Barney, like Morse himself, is a gambler at heart, always ready to take the big chance on a windfall with the potential to raise his stature to the level of titans like J.P. Morgan. So Morse makes his case for cornering the copper market to Barney. Barney signs on, and when the gamble backfires spectacularly, precipitating the terrible panic of 1907, Barney loses the trust of Knickerbocker depositors, and there's a run on his bank. It's the first in a devastating string of bank failures that threaten the whole fabric of Wall Street and bring the career of the street's wunderkind to an ignominious end. It's about 10 a.m. on November 14th, 1907, when Lily hears the crack of gunshot and rushes to her husband's bedroom, where she finds Charles lying on the floor next to a revolver he has used to shoot himself in the stomach. Kneeling beside him, she cradles his head in her lap and tries to soothe him, but the self-inflicted wound proves fatal. Unable to face life with his reputation in tatters, the 57-year-old Charles Barney has committed suicide in disgrace, leaving Lily to face a stream of rumors and innuendos. Press reports hint that she and her husband had become acutely estranged, that a divorce was imminent, and that there was another woman. Lily survives the scandal and outlives her husband by nearly 40 years. Ever the dedicated socialite, in 1928, Lily is seen at the Meadow Club hosting a luncheon for another widowed survivor of scandal, Mrs. Stanford White. In my next Gilded Age talk, I'll examine the life of a woman whose impressive pedigree and iron will made her the acknowledged ruler of Southampton's Old Guard Society, Louisa Robb Livingston. Thank you. That is where I conclude.
Thanks, Mary. I had to unmute my mic. It's always awkward after these talks when there's not like a nice polite clap from the crowd or anything like that. But I believe everybody at home probably had a great time watching. Again, if anybody does have any questions, please feel free to submit them. Again, that would be on the bottom of the Zoom toolbar. There should be a function that says Q&A. There's also a chat function. You can submit your questions that way as well. And for anybody watching on Facebook, feel free to submit your questions in the comments and we'll be glad to answer any that you might have. Let's see. First question, Mary, from Nancy Kane. Were the other 7 jewels ever found from the fire?
I have to say, I don't know, but I'll bet they were. If he was going through the ashes with a sieve and they were diamonds, I mean, diamonds would survive, I think. But I actually don't know the answer.
Let's see, we have somebody else asking, Penny asking, do you have access to any of her descendants?
To any what?
Any of her descendants.
No, I heard there was a Barney around. I've been looking for him, but I haven't found him yet. I believe he might be in real estate.
Okay. Well, if anybody knows of any Barneys,
Yeah.
send them our way. Give us a call. I'll put them in touch with Mary.
Yeah.
We have a third question, or sorry, not a question, but thank you for your informative talk. Interesting to travel back in time, from Kathleen Hendrickson.
Very nice. Thank you.
No problem, Kathleen. That's what we're here for. And you can join us pretty much every Thursday around 11 a.m. for either Mary, myself, one of our other coworkers, or hopefully down the line in the future, we'll have some other guest speakers coming in to give some great talks. If anybody else has any questions, please be sure to submit them. If not, I guess this is where we could end our presentation for this morning after a brief half-hour talk. Again, I just want to remind everybody, for all of our future programs, lectures, anything like that, make sure to go to southamptonhistory.org/calendar. You can scroll down through the page and RSVP for as many programs as you're interested in. And I also want to remind everybody to remember to vote for the Southampton History Museum on the upcoming Board of Education vote for the Southampton Union Free School District. We are proposition number 5. Please make sure to vote yes on that proposition. And if you want any more information on that, you can go to southamptonhistory.org/BOE to read all the information about that, how to vote, who to contact if you haven't gotten your absentee ballot yet. All that information can be found right there. And let's see, we do have actually another question. Let's see, from, I believe, your son, Orson. Perhaps you said it and I missed it, but what was the cause of the Barney fire?
They had work being done, and I believe it was perhaps when they were working on the electricity.
Gotcha. Always have to be careful with that electrical hookups. But again, I believe those are all the questions we have for today. We will thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you, Mary, for this great talk.
Thank you.
All right, have a good day, everybody. Bye.